Right, so we're picking up with portals of entry and exit. So some of the ways pathogens can enter the human body is by penetrating mucous membranes, and this is the easiest route. Mucous membranes are not well protected. The membranes are very thin, often, so if we're thinking mucous membranes would be, for example, the respiratory tract or the gastrointestinal tract. These mucous membranes are designed to exchange materials between the inside of the body and the outside of the body, like gas exchange in the respiratory system, nutrient exchange in the gastrointestinal system. So these membranes have to be very thin to allow that exchange to occur. That makes them very vulnerable to invasion. So here's some examples of diseases: pneumonia, influenza, measles, novel coronavirus for the respiratory tract, diarrhea, polio, parasites, gastrointestinal tract. Another portal of entry would be through the skin, and this is much tougher for pathogens. Your skin is keratinized. What that means is, first of all, you have many, many, many layers of dead cells all compacted together to form your skin, and each of those cells, those dead cells, is filled with a protein called keratin, which is really, really tough. It's waterproof, and it's just a tough layer that's difficult for pathogens to penetrate. So pathogens that are penetrating your skin, that are entering your body through the skin, they have to find weak spots. For example, hair follicles, sweat glands. Those can be portals of entry. You might think of staph, for example, staph infections, or any kind of bacteria that causes a pimple. Those are usually in hair follicles or sweat glands. Some pathogens that get into your body they're opportunistic. They look for compromises in your skin barrier. So wounds, they might enter through a wound or through a needle, or some of them actively penetrate, they actively compromise the skin barrier by employing a biological vector, which we just talked about in the last lecture. So for example, malaria can get through your skin directly into your blood by employing a mosquito in a way. So they capitalize on the fact that the mosquito wants to bite you and suck your blood. That gives it entry into your bloodstream. So another example would be rabies. Rabies gets passed through bites as well, right? So a rabid dog gets the rabies directly into your bloodstream. Portals of exit. And by the way, the step 1, step 5, in the last lecture we talked about the 5 steps a pathogen takes to infect the human body. So there was step 1 was portal of entry. Step 2 was adhering to host tissue or host cells. Step 3 was evading host defenses, evading the immune system. Step 4 was causing tissue damage, and step 5 is exiting. We're focusing on how pathogens spread, so we're going to just focus in on steps 1 and 5, entry and exit. So portals of exit are often the exact same route as the entry portal. So if the pathogen entered through a mucous membrane, it's going to leave through the same mucous membrane, or leave through a mucous membrane, usually the same mucous membrane in most cases. If it entered through the skin, it's going to exit through the skin. So why would an exit strategy from a host be important for a pathogen? Well, the pathogen cannot live within one host forever because the immune system will eventually destroy the pathogen, or the pathogen is going to destroy the host. Both scenarios result in a dead end for the descendants of the original pathogen. So to continue the genetic line, a pathogen has to adopt a nomadic lifestyle. And so pathogens are always traveling from host to host. They have to exit the host in a way that promotes their ability to reach a new host before the immune system catches on or before the host is destroyed. All right, so let's talk about entry-exit routes. So one is skin-to-skin, the skin-to-skin route. So pathogens that are passed this way are papillomavirus. These create genital warts. They can lead to cervical cancer. Another example would be MRSA, which is a drug-resistant version of Staphylococcus aureus, actually all staph. So athletes, you have to have direct contact to pass the staph from one person to the next. So these are direct skin-to-skin contact. These diseases require that in order to move from one host to the next. Another entry-exit route would be blood-borne pathogens, blood-borne route. So these are pathogens that have to move directly into the bloodstream. So hepatitis, HIV can be passed this way, through the blood-borne route. Malaria also is moved through the blood-borne route, right? But through a biological vector, but it still requires direct blood mixing. So the blood of one host with the pathogen is mixed with the blood of the person who's receiving the pathogen. So that's the blood-borne route. So skin-to-skin route, blood-borne route. We also have the fecal-oral route. These are usually intestinal pathogens. So I said usually the pathogen enters the same way that it exits. This here we have entering through the oral orifice, exiting through feces. This is still, you can just think of this all as the gastrointestinal tract, because your mouth and your anus are both part of the GI tract, right? It's a one-way system though, so you go in one end, out the other. So examples would be Salmonella, Shigella, E. coli, things that cause food poisoning. Pathogens that use the fecal-oral route are often passed through water or food. They can also be passed through fomites, that's indirect contact in daycares, for example. So there's studies that look at how much fecal matter is on toys in daycares, and it's horrible. So that's why they sterilize everything almost every day in daycares. So those are examples. So the entry-exit route is different from the kind of transmission used that we covered in the last PowerPoint. So you can have vehicles like water or food, so that's vehicle transmission using the fecal-oral route, right? Or you can have direct transmission employing the fecal-oral route. And then we have venereal disease or sexual contacts, STDs. So hepatitis, HIV, papilloma, HPV, gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia. So these are all examples of pathogens that use the venereal route. So both, again, entry and exit is the same. And you'll notice that there are overlaps, right? So you've seen HIV on more than one entry-exit route. So often pathogens have more than one way to get around. So HIV can, for example, go the blood-borne route or the venereal route. So let's talk a little bit about how this relates to natural selection and evolution of pathogens. So how do pathogens evolve over time? How do they typically evolve over time? We talked about this a little bit when we talked about the Spanish flu, but now we're going to go into this in a little more detail. So let's take disease A, just some disease so we'll call it disease A. It's transmitted through a sneeze. This is droplet transmission, which is one of the subcategories of contact transmission. Remember, contact transmission, we had direct, indirect, and droplet. So this is contact transmission. And let's say we have, there's diversity in every population, even for bacteria. We talked about that in genetics. So you have different versions of disease A. They're all the same species, but some are more harmful than others. So let's say strain 1 of disease A is mildly virulent. People can go to work when they have this disease. They feel well enough to be up and about. They're not comfortable. They don't want to go to work, but they can, and so they often do. So they're out and about. Strain 2 is extremely virulent. People who are infected with strain 2 of disease A are sick in bed. They can't leave their home. So which of these two strains is going to spread to more people? So you have strain 1. It's mild. People don't feel that sick. They can go to work. Strain 2 is not mild. It's very harmful. People who have it they're bedridden. Which strain is infecting more people? Well, the answer is strain 1. Because those infected with strain 2, if they're staying home in bed, and this is a contact transmission pathogen, it requires close contact between people in order to be transmitted. It's only going to be the hosts that are out and about making contact with other people who are spreading their disease. So that woman sitting there at the work table, sneezing into her tissue, her fomite, all those people around her have a chance of being infected. Whereas a patient sick in bed, they're not infecting anybody. So this is why diseases that rely on contact transmission tend to evolve towards mildness over time, under normal circumstances. Let's look at disease B now. Disease B is transmitted through mosquito bites. It's vector transmission. Strain 1 is mildly virulent. People can go to work if they are infected with this disease. Strain 2 is extremely virulent, very harmful. People who are infected with strain 2 of disease B, are bedridden, but they live in mosquito-susceptible houses. So we might say, for example, this is in a rural part of Africa where people are living in mud huts. They don't have screens on their windows. They don't have glass on their windows. So now, with this is a vector-borne transmission, so it relies on mosquito bites. Mosquitoes move the pathogen from one host to the next. And we're now in a place where people who are sick in bed, they're still exposed to mosquitoes. Which of these strains spreads to more people? So strain 1, people are mildly ill. They can go out, go to work, go out and see their friends. Strain 2, people are sick in bed. But even when sick in bed, they don't have protection from mosquitoes, which is going to spread to more people. The answer is they might be equal, and maybe strain 2 would spread even faster. So they might be equal because no one is protected from mosquitoes no matter what degree of illness they have. Or maybe strain 2 is spreading more quickly because strain 2, people, if they're sick in bed, they might not be swatting the mosquitoes, so they're more vulnerable if they're sleeping. Also, more harmful pathogens are taking advantage of their human host more quickly. They're often creating new generations more quickly because they're more aggressive. So that's another reason the more harmful strains can spread more quickly. So for vector-borne diseases, often it's the more harmful strains that are favored, that are spread to more people. So vector-borne diseases tend to evolve towards harmfulness over time. So this has to do with the human environment. Right? It has to do, so we're taking into account both how the disease is transmitted and the human environment. So you have to keep both in mind. There's no formula for memorizing which diseases spread more rapidly. It's true that in general, pathogens that rely on contact transmission evolve towards mildness because healthy hosts spread the disease more because they're walking around making contact with other people. It's also true that vector-borne diseases tend to evolve towards harmfulness over time, but not always. So let's look at this new scenario. So we have disease B again, transmitted through mosquito bites. That's vector transmission. Strain 1 is mildly virulent again. People who are infected with strain 1 feel well enough to go out, go to work, go see their friends. Strain 2 is extremely harmful, keeping people sick in bed. But now we have these people in mosquito-proof houses. Now people who are the sickest are not having contact with the mosquito vector that moves the disease around. In this new human environment, which strain is going to spread to more people? The harmful strain or the mild strain? In this environment, now it's the exact same pathogen. All we've changed is the human environment. And in this new scenario, it's the mild strain that's favored. So in this scenario, the pathogen is going to evolve towards mildness because humans with the harmful disease are now basically quarantined. They're home in bed. The mosquitoes can't reach them because they're living in mosquito-proof houses, and they are not transmitting their pathogen to other humans. People who have the mild version of the disease are out exposed to mosquitoes moving around. So it's not just how the pathogen is spread, it's also taking into account elements of the human environment. So in places where there are no mosquito-proof houses, those kinds of places are where vector-borne diseases evolve towards harmfulness. Places with mosquito-proof housing, that's where you can see those diseases evolve towards mildness as well. So I have a link for you on the course website. It's called Domesticating Germs. The researcher it's a TED Talk, and the researcher speaks about taking in what we know about evolution and using that information to control the evolution of our pathogens. So if we understand how to change our human environment in such a way to force pathogens to evolve in the direction we want them to evolve towards mildness. And he talks about data using cholera. So cholera is it uses water as a vehicle. It's vehicle transmission using waterways. So it matters whether the human environment involves clean water or unsanitary water. So when people have plumbing, water sanitization, water treatment systems, that changes how the pathogen evolves over time versus people who are just, taking water from riverways where people upstream are transmitting the pathogen. to people downstream.